Then coming to our second story here, Idaho candidate races. For those not aware, because I even kind of missed this a little bit. Last week, the window to apply to run for public office in the state closed. Depending on when you're listening to this, that date may change, but it closed in the past, which if you wanted to run, sorry, that window has closed there. But for those who have, we now have the wonderful ability to see who will be running in so said races because that window has closed. Now, all that said, with this segment, I want to try to go through and look at those and kind of give you an idea and breakdown of those. If you want to go look for your specific area, please go and do that. Unfortunately, we just don't have time to cover all of them, especially when I think there's like 70 representatives in the state and then like 35 senators. So that's kind of a lot to go through, but we're going to just try to hit the high points there as we run through this and also talk about the United States representatives, which there's not as many running those because there's only 2 positions open and then the people running for them. But with that said, John, you want to kind of break down for us how generally that works for people?
Yeah, so there are a lot of finer details to this, but for the sake of getting to the candidates, we're just going to do a quick overview. So for the U.S. representative that we have, the state is divided into 2 legislative districts. The first one hugs the western side and completely covers the northern tip, and the second one covers all of eastern Idaho and most of Boise. Votes are held in each of these districts for the candidates that will represent them. So then for the state representatives that represent you in the Idaho House, they're decided based on your district, which there are 35 in the state, and each gets 2 representatives totaling 70 for the whole state. And then the Senate, very similar to the state representatives, your senators are connected to those 35 districts, but the difference is that your district only gets 1, not 2, like with your representatives.
And then kind of then going into the candidates like we wanted to, starting off with the big one here, the one that we'll probably have the most discussion on, is the United States representatives. For representative number 1, that'll be Canyon County, Owyhee County. I can't remember all the counties that are going to be in there. It kind of splits here and there, but you travel, as I said, up kind of the western half, as John alluded to there, and covers most of the north. The current one for that is Russ Fulcher. He will be running again on a Republican ticket. And then for the Democrats, they have Kaylee Peterson running on that. And then for the Libertarians, there's Matt Losby. And then the fourth one, so there's 4 there. And then for the Constitutionalists, you have Brendan J. Gomez. So that would be for Representative 1. Then for Representative 2, a gentleman that we have talked about at length. Currently, you have Mike Simpson as the Republican for that position. And then following up behind him, also, we have a couple running on the Republican ticket, Scott Cleveland, and then Sean Higgins, all running Republican, and then David Roth, who's running as a Democrat, and then we have Todd Corsetti running for the Libertarians, and then 2 for the Constitutionalists you have Curtis Sarah, and then Marvin Richardson, also running on that constitutional ticket, which I would, not getting too deep into the weeds there, I would say that you can see there's a little bit of dislike for the current person in that position for Representative 2, just by the amount of submissions that are kind of running in that lane, even in the Republican, that you see up with Russ Fulcher, Russ Fulcher's the only Republican running for that, which, I would say is a sign that everyone's pretty happy with that position. But then for Representative 2, you've got 2 Republicans running against the current incumbent, Mike Simpson. We'll probably break down some stuff later on that, and I'm working on some interviews with some people running against him, because I know it's something we've talked about before on the show. But then kind of moving on to Idaho Senator map, let me pull open mine here so I have it. We can start here in the Treasure Valley. There. So I know I won't get into the controversy on air with this, but for Legislative District 13, I know that one has been a hopping. So for senators, they are 3. So Democrat Sarah Butler, and then a gentleman we mentioned here before, or if I haven't, I should have, because he's doing some pretty awesome work there in the legislature, Brian Lenny. Mm-hmm. And then he has someone following it up to try to take his position, Jeff C. Agenbrod. Forgive me, sir, if I have gotten your last name wrong. And then kind of going over, so we'll make sure to hit the Treasure Valley here. You have Legislative District 12, Ben Adams, who's the current incumbent. I know that. He's running again against Victor Rodriguez. The Treasure Valley is the one that's the most tightly packed. If you look right across the state, just population.
There's a lot of districts in here.
Yeah, I don't know the exact ruling on that, but I know that has to do with population, and then that decides the districting and how that all works out. And that, I think, comes from, I can't remember. I think that's from the Attorney General.
Well, because your representatives and, well, your senators and representatives are only supposed to represent a certain number of people.
Right.
And so as populations change and people move, you have to redraw district lines to make sure that your representatives aren't representing a disproportionate number, either too many or too little. And that's where a lot of interesting conversations come up on gerrymandering, districting and where you draw those lines and how you draw them, and things can get really weird. I look at ours in Boise, and they look pretty solid. They're kind of just blocks of, well, here's this area, and then here's this area and this area. We don't have any of those weird. Gosh, you look at the Chicago districts or New York districts, and gosh, they're all over the place, and they're crazy, and there's little fingers going everywhere, and it's insane.
You're like, why is there a giant finger? How is that still connected to your population when it's several miles away?
Or you have like two balls connected by a string, and you're like, what? How is that a district? And it's just so that you can pack the people that you want in the district that you know will vote the way you want them to vote, and then you call that a district and you call it done, so that you can keep the people in power that you want to have in power. Yeah.
Which, I mean, we won't go too deep on the House part, but John, I do have a list there of a bunch of unopposed candidates that are going to be running, so we actually have a little bit of a list of that if you wanted to read that real quick.
Yeah, so we can go through those. So unopposed candidates, there's a small group of 3 senators and 6 House members, and we might have covered those already, but 3 Republicans and 6 Democrats are unopposed in both the primary and the general, which kind of blows my mind that you would run unopposed even in your primary, but I guess everybody loves you, so no one's going to run against you. Anyway, so this includes Senators Kelly Anthon, James Ritchie, and then Melissa Wintrow, and then Representatives John Gannon, Brooke Green, Ted Hill, James Holtzclaw. Dude, that's a cool name. Holtzclaw?
Yes, that's super cool.
Like, that's one that I would rather go by my last name instead of my first. Hey, Holtzclaw, come over here. Yeah, man. Sorry. Then Representatives Chris Mathias. I've read that name and it throws me off. Representatives Chris Mathias and Elena Rubel.
Right.
Elena threw me, but that's a cool name too. I like that, Elena.
You know, it is interesting when you're looking at legislature, you'll run into interesting names, and I love interesting names. They can be a little bit challenging to record on the show, and you at some point the viewer will see bloopers of it where I have a knack to come up with words that weren't there to begin with, but my brain just looked at the words like, I think it's that, and it's not.
It reminds me a lot of my wife. So we read some fantasy books together, like, you know, Lord of the Rings type books, and the names that she comes up with for characters, it blows my mind, because I look at the name and I try and figure out how it would be pronounced. She just looks at the name, comes up with something as a placeholder in her brain, and moves on.
I'll do that too, because I want to read. I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out the name.
Yeah. The one that I love is The Wheel of Time, and actually I don't know if there's a pronunciation guide in that one, and I remember I didn't know there was until I got to the end of the first book, and then I went, uh-oh. Now I have to go relearn how everyone's names are pronounced because I apparently pronounced them completely wrong. And then the funniest part, so that series is, I think it's like 13 books, and it spanned, I don't know, 15, 20 years. Wheel of Time fans are going to murder me on this one, but sorry. But yeah, then I went back and listened, and the narrators throughout the series, they changed the way they narrate and pronounce names. There's 2 of them. There's a guy and a gal who are reading, and they're not consistent with each other, and they're not consistent with themselves from book to book, and it's wonderful. I love it. But anyway, yeah.
Like, welcome to humanity.
Yep. Names are awesome.
Right. Which, kind of touching on something we already kind of discovered while looking through there has been an increased amount of Democrats participating. So out of the 105 legislative races, there are 81, which is a significant increase from the 45 races that they contested in 2022. So that's almost like 2 times the amount that they're contesting in races this year. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. As on like the Republican side of things, the Republicans have fielded candidates for 99 of the 105 seats in the legislature. We weren't able to find candidates for 5 races in the blue-leaning districts in Boise and then swing districts in Bannock County. And then for those, as things progress, to give, I guess, you guys a heads up as things go on, we're going to make sure to cover this. So please like and subscribe. That would be nice so we can keep you up to date on it. The primary election for all these is set for May 21st, 2024. And then the winners of the primary, so kind of that whittling down, if you have a bunch of Republicans, who's going to be the Republican in that race, then advances to the main election that will be on November 5th for 2024. So mark your calendars for that. We'll try to keep that up to date. And for anybody that's listening out there that is running in these races, please reach out. We'd love to have you on for an interview so people can hear you running for that, especially if it's a position that's a little bit more contested. We would love to have that and have that discussion, ask you questions specifically on what you're running on and what positions and why you think you'd be best for that role.